colleagues and people outside of this place are seriously troubled that Arthur was subjected to a campaign of appalling cruelty and murdered after concerns had been raised with local services. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell you and colleagues across the House, and I want to assure the public that I am as determined as everybody in this House to get to the truth and expose what went wrong and take any action necessary to protect children. To do so, serious questions need to be asked. I want to make clear that police officers, teachers, social workers, health workers and others go to work each day to try to make things better, to do their best at what are very difficult jobs. Those already serving our country's most vulnerable children deserve our thanks, and I want to be extremely clear that no safeguarding professional should be the victim of any abuse. The targeting of individuals is wrong and helps nobody. But that does not mean we should not seek to understand what went wrong and how we can stop it from happening again. The public deserve to know why, in this rare case, things went horrifyingly wrong and what more could be done to prevent abuse such as this happening again in the future. Since the horrendous deaths of Peter Connolly, Daniel Pelker and sadly others, the government has established stronger multi-agency working, putting a shared and equal duty on police, councils and health in local areas to work together to safeguard and promote the welfare of children alongside a role for schools. I'm sure members across the House will recognise that improvements have been made from previous reviews, but the question now is whether that is enough. In order to look at issues nationally as well as locally, we established the National Child Safeguarding Practice Review Panel in 2017 for cases like Arthur's. That is why, given the enormity of this case, the range of agencies involved and the potential for its implications to be felt nationally, over the weekend, Mr. Speaker, I asked Annie Hudson, Chair of the National Child Safeguarding Practice Review Panel, to work with leaders in Solihull to deliver a single national independent review of Arthur's death to identify what must be learnt from this terrible case. This will encompass local government as well as those working in the police, health and education sectors. Officials in my department are already in close contact with the Solihull Safeguarding Partnership, which is grateful for the support offered and agree with this approach as the best way to deliver comprehensive national learning and identify whether there are any gaps that need to be addressed. Annie and her colleagues on the national panel, who come from the police, health and children's services, have dedicated their lives and decades-long careers to bettering the lives of the most vulnerable children in our society. And I have every faith that their review will be robust, it will be vigorous and thorough. I've already assured Annie, as I assure you, Mr. Speaker, now, that she will be given all the support she needs to do the job properly. This review will focus specifically on Arthur's case and identify where improvements need to be made. But I also want to make certain we have looked at how all the relevant local agencies are working now, including how they are working together. For that reason, I have also asked Ofsted, the Care Quality Commission, Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary and Fire and Rescue Services, and Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Probation to lead a joint targeted area inspection. I have asked that each of these inspectorates be involved because of the range of local services which had been involved in Arthur and his family's life during the preceding months. These joint inspections are well established, but a new ambitious approach will be used with a sharp focus on the entry point to the child protection system across all agencies. This will mean we can truly look at where improvements are needed by all the agencies tasked with protecting children in the Solihull area, so that we can be assured that we are doing everything in our power to protect other children and prevent such evil crimes. As part of this inspection, all the agencies tasked with protecting children at risk of abuse and neglect in Solihull will have their effectiveness considered and instructed on where improvements must be made, both in Solihull as well as where learnings can be applied to other areas around the country. These inspectorates have met today to plan this work, and the work will begin next week. I, as well as officials in my department and across government, could not be taking this more seriously, and I've been working this weekend to bring everyone together to make sure this work can start immediately. Over the coming days, we will publish terms of reference and timelines for this national review and the local inspection. Ahead of that, more widely, we are already investing heavily to help the legions of dedicated professionals on the front line deliver the care that we all know every child deserves. Since the spending review in 2019, there have been year-on-year real terms increases for local government, as well as the unprecedented additional £6 billion funding provided directly to councils to support them with the immediate and long-term impact of COVID spending pressures, including children's social care. Yet, we've also known that the care system needed bold and wide-ranging reforms, which is why we have the independent review of children's social care happening now. I know that Josh McAllister, who leads the review, Mr. Speaker, will make recommendations about what a decisive child protection response needs to look like, given it sits at the core of the system he is reviewing. And importantly, I know that the review will be looking at how social workers, especially those with the most experience, can spend time with families and protecting children, because we all know social workers do their best work with families, not behind a desk. I look forward, Mr. Speaker, to the review's recommendations in due course, because in any complex system, it is important, it is imperative in my view, to investigate thoroughly, to learn and improve the system. My mantra continues to be that sunlight is the best possible disinfectant, because if we are to improve services where they need improving, we must share data and evidence. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the prosecuting barrister, Jonas Hanken QC, his team and the jury for their service in this troubling case. As the court heard, Arthur's tragic death is a result of the cruelty of his father and his father's partner. No government anywhere in the world can legislate for evil, but we will take action wherever we can to stop it from happening again, because we must do more. And to do more, I'd like to end my statement with a plea to everyone in our country. Anyone who sees or suspects child abuse can report their concerns to local children's services or by contacting the government-supported NSPCC helpline for adults or practitioners concerned about a child or young person. So if you see or suspect child abuse, report it. If you are worried about a child you know, report it. If something appears off or you are seeing something that troubles you, report it. As we uncover what went wrong, Mr. Speaker, and what led to Arthur's tragic death, we must also strengthen our resolve to make sure that we prevent these crimes as much as they can be possibly prevented. We must make sure that those who would do wicked acts to children face justice. We must do absolutely everything in our power to protect vulnerable young children from harrowing and evil abuse. And I commend the statement to the House.
Shadow Secretary of State.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I would like to thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement to the House today. Mr. Speaker, this has been a truly horrendous case. My heart goes out to everyone who knew and loved Arthur, and to all of those involved in investigating and bringing to justice the depraved and wicked individuals responsible for his death. And I join with the Secretary of State in paying tribute to frontline workers right across children's social care who work so hard to support families day in, day out. I welcome the announcement by the Attorney-General's Office that the sentences handed down on Friday will be reviewed under the unduly lenient sentences scheme. And I welcome the Right Honourable Gentleman's clear determination to get to the bottom of what has happened and his action in ordering a national review and a joint targeted area inspection. It is right to put in place inquiries as soon as possible, not merely into how individual agencies acted, but how they acted together. And it's vital that whatever lessons can be learned from what was happened and what didn't happen in Solihull are acted on as soon as possible. Searching questions must be asked about the way in which services operated locally, but questions must also be asked nationally. Questions about how the services that should be keeping children safe are overseen and why, tragically, cases like this keep happening. Now, I know the Secretary of State takes these issues just as seriously as I do, and I very much hope that he will be reviewing urgently the way in which services are inspected, are challenged and are improved. And I ask the Secretary of State, who I know hasn't been in his post for too long, to ensure that his own department gets its house in order. In 2016, the department committed to a target that by 2020, all vulnerable children, no matter where they live, receive the same high quality of care and support, and the best outcome for every child is at the heart of every decision made. The then Permanent Secretary told the Public Accounts Committee that this target was delayed to 2022 because the department did not have a detailed plan in place to deliver that target. The Public Accounts Committee found that the department had made only limited progress in improving the quality of children's social care services. And in 2019, the Permanent Secretary accepted that having nearly 60% of local authorities rated lower than good by Ofsted for children's social care was terrible. Indeed, he told the Public Accounts Committee, "I'm not able to sit in front of you and say that there will be no councils failing their Ofsted inspections in 2022. Clearly there will be. Some schools fail, some hospitals fail, and some councils fail." Mr. Speaker, failure should never be an acceptable outcome for any public service, and that is especially true when it comes to protecting children. For too long, this government has tolerated failing children's services and a failure to protect children. Vulnerable children are being failed, and that cannot go on. The Secretary of State must now set out how he plans to tackle that culture, that failing services are acceptable in our country, acceptable for our children, in his own department, just as much as in Solihull. That is the challenge he faces, and that is the standard by which he will be judged. One final point, Mr. Speaker. We have heard a lot in recent days about the unimaginable suffering this little boy endured at the hands of two evil individuals who brought an end to his short life. But I hope that we can remember also how in better days Arthur lived his short life. I hope that while we do not hesitate to learn from these tragic events, we also, as far as we can, remember Arthur for who he was, not for what others did to him or for how he was let down. I hope that when we hear his name, we think first of a gentle, caring, happy child, the little boy who was remembered so movingly by so many across our country this weekend, the little boy with the beaming smile who should still be here with us today. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm grateful for the Honourable Lady's words, and especially her final few sentences in the way we should remember Arthur, and remember that there are family members who are grieving for Arthur today. I think she makes a powerful point about making sure we continue on the path to improvements. I spent a good amount of time as the Children and Families Minister in the Department of Education, and I think the team have really focused on those improvements in children's social care. She spoke about a long way to go, and I think I would recognise that there are challenges, but I think it's also worth praising the team, both in the department but also in local government up and down the country, where we, not a long time ago, only had about 37% of local authorities having a good Ofsted inspection. I think the one thing I would correct her on, I don't think it's so binary as pass and fail, because actually it's very much about areas of improvement in children's social care. But that 37 now has risen to 50% of local authorities that have got a good inspection. And of course we have to continue on that path and keep going further. But I'm very pleased to hear her supporting the course of action we've taken today.
We now come to the Chair of the Select Committee, Robert Hall.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I strongly endorse what the Secretary of State has set out with the review, and also welcome the particularly the end comments of the Shadow Secretary, which was very moving. I just, as I understand it, this tragedy happened, and that Arthur was not in school and had been kept at home by his father. My right honourable friend will know that putting aside the 200,000 children who the school system know about who are being sent home through COVID, there are another 100,000, what I call the ghost children, who are lost to the system, who haven't returned to school for the most time, who are subject to potentially to safeguarding hazards, county line gangs, online harms, and of course awful domestic abuse. So I ask my right honourable friend to ensure that we're not in this House again discussing these kind of issues or witnessing a further tragedy that we have just heard about, that he proactively makes a real effort to work with the local authorities, to work with the schools and the regional commissioners to make sure that those 100,000 children who are mostly not in school are returned to school and are being watched by those authorities that they need to be watched. We have to get these children back into school, otherwise we'll face, I hope not, but we may face further tragedies along the way.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend and Chairman of the Education Select Committee. I think he is absolutely right to raise this issue. It is a concerning issue. It is a focus for my department. I am working closely with other departments and agencies to work through this. He will know that we launched See Here Respond programme aimed at supporting vulnerable children and young people whose usual support networks were impacted by the pandemic and national restrictions. The tragedy for Arthur is he wasn't ever off the school register, but nevertheless the point the Chairman of the Education Select Committee makes is a powerful one.
We now come to SNP spokesperson Carol Monaghan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. And it's unusual that we're here in this House with so much cross-party agreement on an issue. But the Secretary of State spoke from the heart and with a real genuine desire for change, and I hope we can be supportive of that. And I also want to join him in commending those who brought Arthur's killers to justice. I wish to offer both my condolences and the condolences of SNP members to Arthur's family and loved ones. This tragic death has affected us all, and the footage of the little boy saying, "No one loves me," will remain with many of us. I think parents hugged their own children a lot harder when they heard that. And we're shocked for two reasons. Firstly, that these people exist and were put in charge of such an innocent little soul. And secondly, that opportunities were missed that would have prevented this tragedy. The government review is important, but if failings are found to be due to resourcing, will the Secretary of State commit to properly and directly funding child protection services? It's not enough that they're coming through councils. If it needs direct government funding, will he do that? And he talked about agencies working together. How is he going to monitor how well this actually happens? There has to be cross-party working on this. So can the Secretary of State assure us today that he will genuinely listen to cross-party recommendations and suggestions on how this can be improved? None of us want to have another Arthur, Baby P or Victoria Climbay. So let's make sure that we can do the best of politics in this and make sure no other vulnerable children are harmed.
I'm grateful for the Honourable Lady and for the way she is so generously offering the support on a cross-party basis, and I hope she will remember that when I was the Vaccine Deployment Minister, I always worked on a cross-party way of cooperating and coordinating, and I hope what we can do through the McAllister review, Josh McAllister review, is make sure we reach out across this House and share that, but also the two reviews that are specifically to this tragic death of young Arthur.
Julian Knight.
May I thank my honourable friend for his statement and also his engagement over the last 72 hours. No one loves me. No one is going to feed me. Those are the words that broke the hearts of my town, and it seems our country as well. A young lad who never had a chance. He experienced unimaginable brutality in his short life. Will my right honourable friend confirm that no stone will remain unturned, no difficult question remain unasked? This investigation will proceed without fear nor favour, and at the end of it we'll know clearly and publicly who failed Arthur and how he was failed. In addition, will my right honourable friend ensure the investigation focuses on the clear breakdown in partnerships between the likes of social services, the police and educators? Why on earth weren't they talking to each other? At the very least, we owe it to Arthur that every lesson from this horrific tragedy is learned, and no town has its heart broken like Solihull's has had.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's words and the words of Arthur that I know have torn the heart of the nation. I assure him that both reviews will be able to go wherever they need to. I hope that he agrees with me that transparency is the best disinfectant in this case. And I just want to place on record, Mr. Speaker, and commend him for making himself available at all times when we needed to make contact and discuss with him and his office what we were planning to announce to the House. Thank you very much.
Emma Lewell-Buck.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Little Arthur's murder has really affected those of us who have direct experience of working closely with abused children. It's a matter of record that when the Secretary of State was Children's Minister and I was his shadow, I repeatedly warned him that pursuing this government's agenda of cuts, increasing bureaucracy, deregulation and privatisation of child protection would cost a child's life. Like his predecessors, he ignored me. However, I know that the Secretary of State is a genuinely caring man, and I certainly don't have all the answers here. But will he please now meet with me so we can at last work together to make sure that no other precious little life is so brutally taken again?
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I, first of all, we're delighted to meet with the Honourable Lady. I think her characterisation is slightly unfair in the sense that not only do we work towards improving the system, and the team both in the department and on the front line did tremendous work. Of course, we worked on Step Up into Social Care Frontline, which delivered thousands of new entrants into the social care system. I think since 2017 we've seen an uplift of 10% of the social care workforce, which I hope she will agree is to be commended. But I'm very happy to also meet with her because I know she cares passionately about this subject.
Sakibati.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I stand with great sadness today. My constituents in Meriden, who are served by Solihull Council, have been devastated by the death of Arthur. My thoughts go out to those who loved him, and I pay tribute to that young boy with that beautiful smile. I welcome the announcements of the inspections and the reviews today. I don't think any Member of Parliament ever wants to be standing here addressing circumstances such as this. And I completely also agree in the Attorney General's review of the sentencing. And I have to admit, many times over the last few days, I've thought they should lock them up and throw away the key. Unfortunately, we have been here before, Madam Deputy Speaker, and what reassurances can my right honourable friend give to my constituents that this inquiry will be a meaningful one that will bring meaningful change that will protect children like Arthur in the future?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's important question, and I would reassure him that both reviews will be thorough, will be shared with the House, but also will feed into Josh McAllister's overall review of children's social care. And I have to say that 29 years minimum for the murder of Arthur and 21 years for his father as well is what the court could deliver. But I know that the Attorney General has had a request to look again at the leniency of that sentence.
Diane Abbott.
The Secretary of State said earlier that he will do anything it takes to protect children. So can the Secretary of State assure the House that if it transpires that one of the main issues behind the horrific and cruel death of this child was not enough social workers, too much pressure on existing social workers, that he will make the case to his colleagues in government to make the right level of resources available?
Very well.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my the honourable member's question, and I want to thank the 34,000 social workers who are out today and every day protecting young people. And of course, we continue to look to bring more into the profession. I mentioned earlier a 10% rise since 2017. But whatever the reviews, and of course the McAllister review recommends, it is exactly the thing that we will look to implement.
Tim Norton.
Can I refer to my entry in the register? I'm sure the Secretary of State shares my sense of déjà vu. This tragic case revealed familiar failings raised 12 years ago by Lord Laming in his report into the BBP and how we need to have better joint working, 11 years ago when we started publishing serious case reviews so we could all learn from them, and 10 years ago when I launched the Munro Review, crucially, not as a knee-jerk reaction to a recent tragedy, to free up social workers from the bureaucracy that was keeping them from eyeballing and face-to-face time with those vulnerable families. So whilst welcoming, definitely welcoming, the government's determination to respond urgently with a review, can I suggest that first, he reviews why the findings of previous reviews have not been acted on, or why the system has not allowed the necessary changes to happen?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend's question, and he has what I would describe as institutional memory of the children's social care system, and of course his work as Children and Families Minister and Department has remained invaluable. He's right to challenge us on making sure that what we intend to implement from those reviews, including the Munro Review, which the Department accepted almost, I think, the majority of the recommendations, what happens then operationally on the ground to reflect that, and I think that is equally important. It's why the McAllister Review is so important, so that actually it deals with the operational challenges, so we can turn some of this stuff into reality on the ground.
Stephen McCabe.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for the tone of his statement, and as someone who once did this work, I'm very loath to start picking on individuals. I do understand. But I do want to say to him that leadership in this kind of work is very important, and I hope that some aspect of the inquiry will look at senior management appointments, and that the apparent senior managerial merry-go-round that can allow someone to leave a failing department and assume an almost identical post in a neighbouring authority.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my friend's important question. I think the reviews will look at all aspects of the failures in this tragic case. It's worth just reminding the House that it is directors of children's services work also very closely with chief execs and of course lead members, and I think it's, in my time as Children and Families Minister, I remember it's that combination of leadership that really does deliver the right outcomes that we want to see, but the review will look at that as well.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I refer members to my register of interests because I'm a children's doctor. Arthur's case has shocked and saddened all of us. But as members have already said, we have been here before with similar cases. And in my career, I have seen and looked after far too many children who've been injured and hurt by those who are supposed to love them and care for them the most. I'm really welcoming the Minister's and Secretary of State's review, and I hope it will successfully reduce the number of cases. But I wanted to focus my question on justice in particular, because I have seen cases where we've identified problems, but they've been let down, either because the CPS have accepted lesser pleas to avoid court cases, because in one case I remember the barrister didn't know the name of the children he'd come to represent in local care proceedings, where sentences have passed which have been hideously too low for the severity of the heinous crimes that have been committed. So I asked the Secretary of State to confirm when he's doing his review, will he be working with the Ministry of Justice in these cases too?
Secretary of State.
I can certainly confirm that we will be working with ministers across government on this.
Amelia Wilson.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for his statement and the sentiments expressed within it and the actions that he is taking. I, like everybody else, have found the details of this case harrowing, not least because Arthur was the same age as my daughter, and it's just unbelievable. And my thoughts are with all those who knew and loved him. Given that we know that among the social worker workforce, there's a high turnover rate, there's about 7.5% vacancy rate at the moment, and we know that about a quarter of that workforce is due for retirement in the next 10 years. Could I ask that, whether it's through this review or the McAllister review, that the Secretary of State will commit to looking at recruitment, retention and training of social workers, and also, given their workload has gone up whilst there's been some £2.2 billion of cuts to social services over the last decade, will he commit that to whatever resources it takes, because we cannot put a price on a child's life?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for the honourable member's question. I think she's absolutely right that we need to make sure that we continue to retain the more experienced social worker leadership, and I think it's something that the McAllister review I hope will make some operational recommendations on that. Of course, we have had two very successful schemes with Frontline and Step Up into social care, which resulted in thousands of people coming into the social care profession, and the number of social workers has gone up by 10% since 2017. But where she is absolutely right, we have far too many, if you look at the system overall, agency workers, which I think is her point, where you want that experience and that leadership to be full-time in a local authority system rather than working on an agency basis.
Lucy.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I would like to thank the Secretary of State for his statement and for his tone throughout this session. I know when he was Children's Minister that he was passionate about child safeguarding, and I know that children are in safe hands with him at the helm, and I'm grateful for that. This horrific case shows that fundamental reform of children's social care is now long overdue. Lessons learned and case reviews are just not enough. Does the Minister agree that the problems with children's social care are systemic and that the challenges faced are not just about funding? And will he also agree that scapegoating individuals, particularly inexperienced social workers, will not improve the care of these most vulnerable children?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question. She's absolutely right to say that we have to make sure we deliver better outcomes, and the way we recognise that, which is why we made it a manifesto pledge that we would have the review, the McAllister review, which will, I'm confident, deliver recommendations that I hope we can be ambitious and deliver rapidly. Where she's also right is to say that we can't just continue to have review after review. We have to learn from those and operationally implement the recommendations. Why? Because, and this is, I'm passionate about this, in any complex system you have to have a thorough investigation, because that's how you improve complex systems and make them fail-safe for those they're protecting.
Barry Shearman.
Madam Deputy Speaker, I remember that when I was the chair of the Select Committee for 10 years, the Education Select Committee, we had some awful cases, tragic cases like this, And my heart goes out to little Arthur and anyone who knew him. But I like the tone of the Secretary of State's opening remarks. When Baby P investigation went on, there was a hue and cry from the popular media, and some politicians joined it. And I still have a guilty conscience of the way Sharon Shoesmith was handed out of office, and no one ever apologised for what happened to that woman. Can I just, two quick things. He will know that good children's services and good multi-agency working is expensive, and we need the resources in local government to actually deliver. And finally, one of the most worrying things when I was chair of the Select Committee is this reluctance to square up to the fact we should know where every child in our country is. Homeschooling has put a big question mark over knowing what is happening to children in the home environment. Does he share my concern, and could we have a conversation about it at a later date?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend and his very important question. Just to unpack a little bit of it, I think he is right to say that we need to make sure we know where every child is. There are some excellent examples of homeschooling with parents who really do a great job, but that's not always the case. I know that he cares passionately about the work of children's social services, and I hope that he will continue to care for this when he leaves this place, as he has announced he's doing. He will be sorely missed, I think, and his input will be missed. But his point around local councils, obviously in this year and next year's budget, they've got a spending power of about 51.3 billion core spending power for their services. They've had a real term increase in terms of what they can do with the 6 billion, obviously, to cope with COVID as well. But nevertheless, I think it's important that we don't scapegoat anyone. And he's absolutely right. We've got to make sure that we allow the both the panel and the review to take their course and report back to this House.
Bob Blackman. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I go back a little longer than other people and refer to the Jasmine Beckford case, as well as the Victoria Climbier case, the Baby Peter case, and now that of Arthur. The one common theme throughout this whole terrible series of events is that the opportunities to take a child to safety were missed. So will my right honourable friend make sure that the message goes out to frontline children's social workers if they have a suspicion of a child being abused, it will be thoroughly investigated, and if necessary, that child will be removed to a place of safety.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question, and he is right to remind us of the Beckford, obviously Climbier, and tragically now Arthur case. I think social workers are doing a tremendous job, and I think it's important that that multi-agency work that, for whatever reason, and we'll find out through these two reviews, missed Arthur in this case and didn't take him away. Obviously has evil, manipulative father and the partner, but nevertheless we have to make sure that if there is any evidence, any inkling, any iota of harm to any child, the child is taken away immediately.
Kerry McCarthy.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. 300,000 children a year are affected by parental imprisonment, and as I understand it, Arthur was one of them. So what this case highlights is the lack of a statutory mechanism to identify and support such children. The moment that he was put in, I won't say his father's care, but in his father's charge, there should have been that identification and support there. I am due to meet the Minister to discuss this on Monday, but can I just urge the Secretary of State that this needs flagging up within this review?
Secretary of State.
The Honourable Lady raises an important point. I know from my time as Children and Families Minister, she has been campaigning on this issue, and I know she's meeting the Minister for Children and Families on Monday, but I will certainly take a look very closely at what she says and feed back to the panel as well.
Kelly Tolhurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I must declare my sister is a social worker, And no one can understand how beautiful little Arthur died at the hands of the people that were charged of caring for him. And I have great respect for my honourable friend, and I know that he will absolutely be determined in his passion to get to exactly why this happened and the learnings that we can take forward. But does my right honourable friend agree with me that it is now finally time to really look and deal with the caseload that these social workers have to deal with some of them excessive caseloads, very complex cases? Can we finally give social workers the confidence, the safety and the time to be able to do the job that they love and get up every morning to keep children safe?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's incredibly important question. She will, I hope, remember when I was Children and Families Minister that I was the champion of social workers, and I will continue to be the champion for social workers as Secretary of State. And I will, I'm very confident that the McAllister review, hence why it was such a priority, certainly for us, for it to be in our manifesto. It's so important that we now get this right, and caseload is very much part of that, as she quite rightly identifies.
Carl Turner.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The most important job the state must have is to protect vulnerable children. But social care is facing a mounting crisis. Now, I know the Secretary of State, and I trust entirely that he'll do everything in his power to get to the bottom of what led to this terrible tragedy. But I just wonder, would he please at least acknowledge that 60% cuts to local authorities in the past decade is potentially having a dramatic impact on these services?
I'm grateful for the honourable gentleman. I will always go where the evidence leads. The reason we've asked Josh McAllister to conduct this review prior to this tragic murder of this innocent young boy is because we know we want to make sure we deliver a system that is fit for purpose. We've made more funding available, but it depends what the review will come back. And I will certainly be at this dispatch box and go through that with colleagues here to make sure we get this right.
Simon Hall.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. And like many, can I just say what a relief it is that my right honourable friend is at the helm on this issue, because this has been a bone-chilling case. He was right in his statement when he said that no government anywhere in the world can legislate for evil, and we have seen evil in this case. And we also know that hard-working professionals can't be everywhere all of the time. Quite rightly, the Campaign for Violence Against Women and Girls has a high national profile and a command of respect of ministers across government. Can I urge my right honourable friend to begin such a crusade to combat neglect and violence against children, and where, as others have noted, the precautionary principle, the taking away of a child if there's a scintilla of doubt, is at the forefront of people's minds, where the resources are available and the law stands foursquare behind them.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question and suggestion, and I would certainly like to take that away and also work on a cross-party basis to make it just culturally unacceptable for children to be neglected or to be harmed or abused in any way.
John Sessionomi.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I'd also like to thank the Secretary of State for his statement and his commitment to get to the bottom of this. I associate myself to all the remarks from members across this House, and like many members, I've got 2 young children. And I hugged my 6-year-old and 4-year-old that little bit tighter this weekend in just so much sadness. One area which I've highlighted in this House before is the fact that we've seen shortcomings within the safeguarding system, and they do need to be addressed. But I'd also like to draw the House's attention to young girls and young children
who are in vulnerable situations and in some cases aren't known to the authorities. I've highlighted the problem with hidden gang-associated girls, many of whom are never picked up. So I'd like to ask the Secretary of State if he would ensure that all children who are at risk of violence and exploitation are identified and properly cared for.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for the Honourable Lady and her very moving words about her own children. I think I felt exactly the same way this weekend about my 9-year-old daughter. She highlights a very important point, which I think the McAllister review is very much about making sure that we have a system that is decisive when it comes to protection of children.
Lord Trott.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his statement, and can I ask him to be mindful, as I know he will be, of learning the lessons from other tragic cases, particularly Baby P, where we saw a massive increase in referrals and also a massive increase in the number of children taken away from the care that they were currently in. I think we need an increase in resources for social workers in the near term to handle that increase in referrals. And I do think there is a balance that needs to be struck between taking children away from their parents or the home that they're in and making sure that they're safe, and that he is sending out that message to social workers.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's very important question. I think she's absolutely right around how social workers, and I've seen them do this brilliantly, in terms of identifying support networks for children. Of course, if there is a scintilla of doubt in terms of any harm being caused to a child, they absolutely should take away. But she also makes a very important point that in learning from previous cases, the additional work that will be now placed upon the social work frontline is something that we are very cognizant of, and I know the Minister for Children and Families is looking at how we can continue to support the front line.
John McDonnell.
Unfortunately, we're too good at setting up reviews and blaming others. This House needs to take some responsibility. In March 2018, the Honourable Member for Reddish, Denton and Reddish published with me a report based upon consultation with children's charities, local government and social work professionals that said after £2 billion worth of cuts, children were at risk and could not be protected. We put forward proposals in the budget that year, and in the following year, and in the following year. 40% cut in early interventions on children. We all get emotional about this. I was 15 years on childcare and dealt with children who had been abused, and I never ever want to see it again. I don't doubt the sincerity of this minister. We've worked with him. He's done a good job where he's been in most cases. So this is a message through him to the Chancellor. We need an emergency funding package for children's services now. We can't wait months for another review. The social workers are overworked and actually underpaid and disrespected. We need them properly funded and supported.
Secretary of State.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would respectfully say that I don't think anybody in this House would ever disrespect the social work workforce or any social worker. I also think that actually having evidence-based strategy is important, which is why the McAllister review is so important to this. It's worth remembering that the core spending of local government has increased on an average of 3% in real terms each year of the next spending review period. So more money is going into local government, but depending on what the McAllister review does deliver, I would certainly be the first to make the argument for properly resourcing children's social care.
David Simmons.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like others, may I thank the Secretary of State for the tone of the statement today. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that the 1989 Children Act, which provides the main legislative and operational underpinning of children's social care, is perhaps in need of updating? Does he have a view about how that might happen? And does he further agree with me, picking up the point made today by the Honourable Member for Solihull, that it is perhaps a weakness in our local safeguarding partnership model that schools and education are not a statutory safeguarding partner?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend. I know he has deep experience in this area. I think he's quite right, Madam Deputy Speaker, that we do need to carefully consider all possible routes to help ensure that children's social care has the powers that they need to protect vulnerable children like Arthur. I think it's important that we wait for both of the reviews before we look at specific legislative improvements that we may take. We obviously need to make sure that the National Panel report and findings of the Joint Targeted Area Inspection come back. And of course we have the independent review that the McAllister Review is conducting. I will not rule out legislative changes if we need to make them.
Andrew Gwynn.
Thank you, and can I also thank the Secretary of State for the tone of this statement. But he keeps mentioning increases in local government core funding in the spending review period. But as my right honourable friend for Hayes and Harlington has just said, this does not outstrip a decade of damage which has left a perfect storm for children's services, alongside increasing demand and ballooning caseloads for social workers. There are massive pressures in the system, so I ask him sincerely to go to the Chancellor, to make the case for children's services, to get that additional resource that is so desperately needed, so that no vulnerable child is failed in the way that little Arthur has been.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for the honourable member's question. I think the funding is one important part of this equation, absolutely, but I think equally important is that we make sure we look at what went wrong and why, and then how we're going to operationally fix that. And when you speak to the likes of Martin Neri, who I was speaking to over the weekend, he will say to this House that it's not only funding, it's actually making sure we have the operational competence to support children's social care and the front line in doing their job, because where they need to be, the best place for social workers, they tell me all the time, is to be with families, working with families, rather than on the bureaucracy that sits behind.
Nikki Aiken.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have never met a social worker who does not go to work every day to make a difference to the people they serve. And I do fear that we don't in this nation always hold social workers in the high regard that we do with teachers, police officers, nurses, doctors. And I think that needs to change. As a former Cabinet Member for Children's Services, I believe fully that it is about local accountability, and that local councillors, whether it's the lead member, whether it's the leader of the council, has a role to play in keeping children safe. It's not just about the DCSs and the social workers. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that it's probably about time that the Department of Education works with the Local Government Association and other organisations within local government to ensure that cabinet members and council leaders really appreciate the role they have to play in keeping our children safe?
Secretary of State.
I thank the honourable, my honourable friend for her excellent question, and I touched on it a little bit earlier. I think she's absolutely right to say where I have seen really good evidence of high-performing children's services is when the chief executive, the lead member, are working and supporting the director of children's service and the frontline, and really understand how the system is working in their locality. So I can certainly reassure her that both myself and the Minister for Children and Families will leave no stone unturned in the work that we do with local government on this.
Kat Smith.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I agree with the Secretary of State that our experienced social workers need to spend more time working with families and not stuck behind a desk doing paperwork, but it is actually a direct consequence of more than a decade of cuts to local government that has led to experienced social workers leaving the profession because of feeling overburdened and rising caseloads, and also directly because of those cuts that they are actually having to do more paperwork. And you can see this pattern emerging through 10 years of research by the British Association of Social Workers. So can I invite the Secretary of State to make time for a meeting with myself as an officer of the APPG on social work and the British Association Association of Social Workers to discuss the things that we can do to actually encourage retention and obviously recruitment of social workers, so we can actually have those experienced social workers working directly with families.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for the Honourable Lady's question. I would certainly make time, as will the Minister for Children and Families. I think she raises a really important point. And I remember when I held the portfolio, we had the What Works in Children's Social Care, which is a sort of an evidence-led approach to do this. And I'm very happy to look at the evidence that she and the APPG can provide, as well as bringing the team that is leading on the What Works in Children's Social Care.
Kieran Mullen.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Like many others, I found myself in tears at the weekend thinking about what happened to poor little Arthur. I welcome the fact that the sentence is potentially going to be reviewed, but I think we shouldn't get overly optimistic. At best, we might see an increase of a few years, because actually sentencing practice in this country is woefully short of what most people think of as justice in cases like this. Every person I've spoken to, everyone that's contacted me, wants to see both of these despicable individuals locked up for the rest of their lives. And I hugely welcome the changes we're making on premeditated child murder to make it so that you should expect a whole life tariff. But does the right member agree with me that any adult that murders a child should expect to spend the rest of their life in prison, regardless of whether or not it was premeditated?
Yeah. Secretary of State.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend's question. I know he feels very strongly about the issue, and he and I have discussed this very recently. He quite rightly reminds the House that last week the government announced that we are currently amending the Police Crime and Sentencing and Courts Bill to include Tony's Law, which will increase the maximum penalty for child cruelty causing or allowing serious physical harm from 10 to 14 years, and the maximum penalty for causing or allowing the death of a child from 14 years to life imprisonment.
George Howard.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I congratulate the Secretary of State on the thoughtful but determined way he's approached this tragic situation. Could I suggest also, he's mentioned the need for multi-agency working, and I'm sure he's right about that. But could I suggest also that as part of the review, they look at the possibility of placing a duty on those agencies to share information, because that seems to have been a problem in this case. And also to establishing a mechanism whereby such information as has been received is properly assessed to see what further steps should be taken in those cases. And of course, as others have said, we do need the resources to be put in to make a system like that work.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for the honourable member's question. He raises a really important issue, although there is that duty to work together and, of course, to share information. One of the things I want the investigation to look at is how well is that working? How can we improve it? Because clearly in this case it has not worked, which is why we've lost poor Arthur.
Jane Hunt.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. If it takes a village to raise a child, let's not make it the case that a whole village has to raise the issue before concerns are addressed. I wonder if my right honourable friend would look in the case of the review about outcomes rather than following rules. Let's allow these multi-agency groups to be bold, to make bold decisions, and to have the confidence that we will support them.
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question. She raises a really, really fundamental issue, is that the system needs to have that confidence and ability to safeguard and protect and, of course, build on relationships that child may have with other members of the family, kinship care, if necessary, or otherwise. That comes through really high-quality leadership, and that's why that has so much been the focus of my work at the time as Children and Families Minister, but I know my honourable friend, the Minister now, continues that work too, but the review, she's right, should look at that too.
Janet Davey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I have 15 years of experience in children's social care as a social worker, and I thank the Shadow Minister for saying that, Secretary of State for saying that he will be a champion for social workers. The death of Arthur is absolutely tragic, and I thank him also for his statement. However, it is not a new phenomenon that social workers are overworked and they spend most of their time doing bureaucratic work. The review to do with Monroe, Louise, Casey, and also Josh McAllister has also stated that social workers spend far too much time during the bureaucracy of their work instead of being with families. Social workers are overworked. What interim measures will the Secretary put in place now, and what are the timescales of when his review will be completed?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for the Honourable Lady. I want to thank her for her 15 years of service as a social worker. She's absolutely right. First quarter next year, there will be a reduction in that bureaucracy that's coming down the line even before the review. But she's also right to say that actually there is too much bureaucracy. I'll never forget going out with a brilliant social worker in Brighton who is a phenomenon. I mean, doing incredible work with the most vulnerable young people. And she said to me privately, she said, I know I shouldn't be saying this to you because you're the minister, but I'm not good at using some of these technologies or bureaucracy, which is why I'm finding it so difficult, so I'm going to retire. And that's the sort of thing that I think the McAllister Review needs to look at very thoroughly.
Mark Jenkinson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his statement and for his commitment to leave no stone unturned in this tragic case. In my constituency of Workington, teachers often find themselves at the front line of social work. And I'll just put on record that I am the husband of a teaching assistant. Some of our secondaries are pilots for social workers in schools, but we know that early intervention is key. So will he look at potentially rolling out that social workers in schools project to primaries across Cumbria as well?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question. I will certainly take a good look at that particular pilot. In my time, again, as Children and Families Minister, I saw similar projects that did tremendous work in schools with the most vulnerable children and their families.
Nick Whitley.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'd also like to thank the Secretary of State for his tone this afternoon. The tragic death of Arthur Labinjo-Hughes has shocked and grieved our nation and served as a painful reminder that nearly enough has been done to protect vulnerable children since the death of baby P over a decade ago. Lord Laming, who chaired the inquiry into the death of Victoria Climby, has warned that 10 years of austerity measures have seriously undermined the ability of social service to protect young people most at risk of serious harm. Does the Secretary of State agree that urgently restoring funding lost since 2010 is essential if we are to stop any child from suffering as Arthur so tragically did?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend's question. I think it's important that we do recognise that the new funding that's going into local government over the spending period, 4.8 billion in total, but the McAllister Review will, I hope, also give us an opportunity to look at how we operationally make best use of funding, but also understand where that bureaucracy lies to free up the front line, to make it an attractive profession, of course, to be part of as well. So all that work will continue at pace once we have the review back.
Last question, Matt Rodden.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I would like to offer my deepest condolences to little Arthur's family and friends. This has been a truly dreadful case, as colleagues across the House have said today. I thank the Secretary of State for his tone and his commitment on this important issue. I would like to hear more from him about his willingness to leave no stone unturned, to do whatever it takes in this case, to explore how we can support these vital public sector workers who need so much help and encouragement at this difficult time. Will he look both at the pay for social workers, the numbers of social workers, the integration of different agencies, and indeed leave no stone unturned, including looking at his own department?
Secretary of State.
I'm grateful for the member's question, and again thank all colleagues for the input and the tone of this important debate that we've had today. The McAllister Review is looking at exactly how we make sure we deliver the best outcome and the support that we offer the front line. I think, sadly, in many ways, I just want to end by really recognising this, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the incredible work that social workers do day in, day out, week in, week out, year in, year out, doesn't get much recognition. the real tragedy, it only reaches the dispatch box when there is a tragedy, like Daniel Pelker or now young Arthur. I just want to place on record that social workers are not on their own. They're not forgotten. They will always be supported. I hope that both the review that I've announced today, but also the McAllister review, will mean we can continue in our support for the front line to make sure we get the best outcomes possible for the most vulnerable children and families in our country.
Well, I thank the Secretary of State for his statement, and is the point of order relevant to the statement that's just taken place? Okay, point of order, Diane Abbott.
The Secretary of State, in response to my question about resources, implied certainly that he would be willing to support any resources about finance that the McAllister Review made. But the Secretary of State would have known perfectly well that his department, the Department for Education, have signed a contract with McAllister which says he cannot assume additional government funding, that any recommendations about funding must be matched by savings elsewhere in government over a period of time, and that any recommendations must be affordable to government. How can the Secretary of State assure the House that he is willing to support recommendations for extra money when the contract his department has signed would seem to apply any such recommendations would not be acceptable?
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Lady for that point of order. It is not actually a point of order for the Chair, but obviously it has enabled her to put on record and to seek any clarification on detail that the Secretary of State reply to her may wish to give further information on. I'm sure the Secretary of State has heard what she said, and I know that if he feels there's anything further he needs to add, he will do. Thank you. We now come to statement from Secretary of State for Health, Sajid Javid.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Can I start by welcoming the Honourable Member for Ilford North to his new position, and by also, Madam Deputy Speaker, wishing his predecessor, the Right Honourable Member for Leicester South, all the very best in his new role too. Throughout this national effort, I've always been grateful for how this House has worked together across the floor in a constructive manner, and I look forward to that continuing.